This video is a little long, but I found the topic really interesting, and maybe you will too, even if it's a bit tangential to atheism. When it comes to donating blood in the US, you might be aware that gay men aren't allowed to do it if they've had sex in the past year. Technically, the ban applies to men who have had sex with men, which is slightly broader than just gay people, but I will use the terminology interchangeably for the sake of this video. The one-year deferral is actually a recent change. In the past, sexually active gay men couldn't donate at all. A version of that FDA regulation has been in place for decades as a result of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. Even though technology has now evolved to let us screen blood for HIV much more quickly and efficiently. So why hasn't the US taken a hint from other countries that have either shortened or eliminated it completely? Japan and the UK have shortened the period, Italy and Spain have eliminated it. Excuses range from imperfect screening tests to opposition from the religious right. It's silly in some ways because a straight man who sleeps with many women is much more of a health risk than a gay man who's monogamous. Yet the gay man is the one who's prevented from donating blood. But we live in a country where same-sex couples can now get married, and where LGBTQ equality is on much firmer footing than it used to be, even though Republicans are now in power. So why not sue the government on grounds that the FDA's restrictions discriminate against gay people? The simple answer is that a lawsuit like that probably wouldn't get anywhere. The FDA's ban is not in place because the government is actively discriminating against gay people. It's a safety issue. They'll say, if we could test the blood for HIV in an instant, we would let everybody donate. But since we can't, we're just restricting the people with the greatest likelihood of having it. That's their argument. But maybe there's another way of winning the legal battle. In an absolutely fascinating paper, Professor Brian Sochik of the UC Davis School of Law thought of an alternative approach to overturning the ban. Even if it didn't work, he wrote, the end result could still weaken the religious freedom laws that Christian right groups have been using to great effect. As he says, the case is a coin toss. Heads, gay right advocates win. Tails, the religious right lose. Sochek's theory is that the ban could be defeated if only we had a sexually active gay donor who insisted that giving blood was an act of faith. After all, Christ gave blood for us, so we ought to do the same. By not being allowed to donate blood, he could then say the government is violating the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which basically says the government can't force you to violate your religious beliefs unless there's a really good reason for it. In the case of this donor, the law seriously burdens his faith. Either he can't give blood, which his church might call an important act of charity, or he has to abstain from having sex for a year, which is no small thing. How could the government be okay with that when it could easily change the blood donation rules to shorten the deferral period, judge people by their risk factors instead of, blanket banning gay men, or just require another round of blood testing? All those methods would let a gay man donate blood and contribute to public health without added risk. The government has no good reason to make it harder for that person to donate, and an exemption for one person could quickly become an exemption for everyone. Now, that's what would happen if the lawsuit succeeded. But what if it didn't work? Sochek says there would still be other kinds of victories for progressives, in the sense that our current interpretation of religious freedom laws, which allow right-wing groups to get away with blatant acts of discrimination, would be severely weakened. In other words, by having to come up with a reason the ban must remain in place, judges would be changing the interpretation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act as we know it. Just to give one example, and Sochek had several, a judge might say the gay blood ban isn't a substantial burden on someone's faith because donating blood is a marginal religious practice. In other words, if charity is what matters to you, go volunteer at a soup kitchen instead. But that would mean the court is deciding what actions are central to your faith and not you. Remember when Hobby Lobby's owners said they didn't want to include contraception coverage in their employees' insurance plans because it violated their religious beliefs? I might say that's ridiculous, but the Supreme Court said it was a sincere belief that deserved respect. They said, if this matters to you and it's vital for the practice of your religion, the government can't get in the way of that. So, by telling a gay man, we're getting in the way of that, the courts may be preventing another Hobby Lobby debacle from taking place. See? Even a loss could upend religious freedom law as we know it. So why hasn't this happened yet? Why aren't gay rights groups working to file such a lawsuit using these arguments? Why aren't they out looking for a perfect plaintiff? Well, there are lots of reasons. Maybe they haven't thought of this idea. Maybe they're worried that if the lawsuit works and the ban is dropped and a donation of blood by a gay man turns out to be tainted, the backlash against the gay community would be swift and severe, and the risks of that completely outweigh the benefits. There's also another reason Sobchak thought this suggestion may not sit well with everyone. A lot of conservatives think gay people are icky. A lot of people in general think blood is icky. So trying to push for equality using two things that people have a visceral reaction to may be a tough sell, even for liberals. You know, it's one thing to say marriage equality matters because everyone deserves a chance to love someone and have that love be recognized by the government. It's another to say men who have sex with men should be able to donate blood the same way as everybody else. I mean, it doesn't sound weird to me, but I can see how people might not be eager to get on board with that. In any case, as someone who was aware of the ban and wondered why it was still in effect and never considered how it could be overturned, I thought it was a really interesting and plausible thought experiment. I will leave a link below so you could read his paper for yourself. My name is Hemant Mehta, and I write at friendlyatheist.com. What do you want to see a video about? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll be sure to check it out. And don't forget to subscribe.